Right. So here I am with Nix, commonly known as Nightmare Nix himself. Nix, how you doing?
Doing good, man. How are you doing?
Pretty good. And so the first place I want to start with this is like I want to start talking like from 2023 onwards because I feel like that's a good place to kind of start things off. And
Yeah.
my first question was like, how did Method come around? Because this is like a project that for a lot of the community it's kind of perceived as the Nix project and perceived as like you were the IGL. Was this like your project that you were building, or was it a bit more of collection of the minds coming together at the start?
No, I'd definitely say that like it was something that I kind of just wanted to build myself in the very beginning. Basically the way that method started was I wasn't getting like great offers like for tryouts or anything like that, and obviously my desire to compete was still very high. I wanted to play in all the upcoming tournaments and stuff like that. So I guess the best place to action in my brain was just let's just make a team and let's see if I can kind of I guess just like kind of fix my image or just kind of get back out there just by building a team rather than trying to get on a team because I guess I've already
Yeah.
kind of went that route. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I kind of just started building method. I reached out to Emma Marmalade just because I knew that playing with her in the past, like she was like a really good player, really good teammate. So I wanted to kind of like play with her again,
Yeah.
and and then kind of just started like a tryout process. Like just I remember we played like with a ton of different people like throughout the very beginning, and then I know like at the end, like with the roster that we ended up playing with, a lot of people like didn't think the roster was even like very good. Like that, like people thought like, oh, it's like just another roster that's like kind of not going to be able to compete anywhere.
Yeah, well, when I was looking through the Wikipedia, I was actually kind of surprised because you guys were like a mid-tier T2 team, and like I don't know if you perceived it this way, but one thing I noticed was wildcard aces just always in the way.
Hmm.
Like that team in particular was just like a major roadblock, and for me for 2023 when I think of T2, they're that mid to upper tier team where it's like
Yeah.
they're gonna make it out of groups, they're gonna be like make it to quarters or semis of whatever T2 T3 tournament they're in. And
Right.
if they're your roadblock, well, you're a step down from that, so you're like mid tier T2. And like
Yeah.
no matter which roster you had in method, you guys were right there. And I was kind of like, oh, that's better than I like thought this team was doing. Like that,
Hmm.
if that's what you're losing to, that's not as bad. Like, what did you think of like the runs? Because you had not only a bunch of different players, but a bunch of just different iterations of method during this run.
I think it's interesting looking back at it and talking about it now because how you kind of say like I didn't really perceive us in that like wavelength of being in that mid-level like T2 team. Like I guess I didn't really give us the credit that we were due maybe at the time.
Mm.
And yeah, like wildcard aces like have always been like that kind of like staple roster. I guess not so much anymore, but like back then like they were like that was kind of like when Bry, Bino, like just that core was like really dominant in T2.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, you're right. We never really beat them. I guess like looking back at the runs, like I think if I honestly just was in more of the moment and rather because like I guess it's something that we would get more into like just like down like it through the interview, but just something kind of like a sneak peek in. I guess I was not really taking it day by day, and I was trying to
Yeah.
think like too long term. And I think if I was just in the moment more with method, just like took it more day by day, I think we actually probably would have found more short term success. But it is what it's like. It's in the past. You can't really change it.
Yeah.
So
And when you say you were taking a more long term perspective, is that like, hey, we need to improve and build upon like what we have, and that was like not savoring the successes that you were finding, or is it more just
yeah, I would say I never like you kind of hit it nail on the head right there. Like
okay.
I didn't really give credit or give appreciation to how well we were doing in the short term. I'm like, okay, like I don't know. I've always just had this pressure on my back coming like from pro. Like I need to get back there. Like oh,
Yeah.
like I have all these like eyes looking at me. Especially when I was building method, people were like looking at it like, oh, is this team gonna be something? Is it gonna like come of something, something of it? And I kind of had that in the back of my head.
Yeah.
So every time I was like, whenever I saw like mistakes or I saw like us not beating wildcard aces, I'm like, guys, like we gotta fix something. We gotta like do this. And I just think it caused uh too much stress, too much tension on the players, and just not a good environment in the end.
Yeah, and just to be clear, were you the IGLing shot caller of Method?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Um, was that like out of did you opt into that? Because I know you look back on some teams like Mirage, oftentimes you were looked at as like kind of that IGL captain position, but you go a little bit farther than that. You know your time on DZ or Reciprocity, you were more just like filling in a role, and how much input you had. You know, you were just one voice amongst like a crew of like strong voices. Because of course you've got Mint there, you've got on DZ, you've got Fox and Lax on Reciprocity. So, you know, obviously lots of strong voices there, but on Mirage and, you know, Method, less so. Was moving into the IGL role something that you wanted to do?
I think it was something that just kind of naturally happened due to my personality. I really think that the role kind of I like adapted into the role starting into Disrupt. I would even say like looking back all the way to Dark Zero, there would even cause problems between me and Kyle Mint because there was times where I would step on his toes in terms of like wanting to make in-game calls.
Okay.
But I would say like I realize that my value as a player, especially now, is in terms of communicating and in terms of IGLing. Just because if you look at the meta and the way that the game's developed, it's much faster paced. It's much just like in your like gunfights and you know the players they're always getting fucking better. They're always getting like the younger players are always coming in. There's always new talent. So
Yeah.
and people are always getting older. Every single day I'm gonna keep getting older. So I always think that my biggest attribute to a team is my experience and my knowledge. So I just try to rely on that, I guess, and try to help my teammates that do have the mechanical talent to just absolutely dominate their opponent.
Yeah, and that is one thing I want to ask about as well. Is like you kind of started as this entry position in some of your shot calling roles, as it were,
Yeah,
but you've slowly kind of started being more of this backline mid flex to soft support, sometimes
right.
hard support, like we saw on Osiris. That was also a conscious choice of like, hey, let the cracked Zoomers have a shot at Ash, you
Yep,
know?
yep.
Okay, and
I just think
so
it comes to like knowing your role. Sorry, I didn't
yeah,
want to cut
yeah,
you off
no, no, no,
there. I just like it's not that I actually feel like I could like hang, I guess you would say, like, in terms of like the mechanical talent and like skill, if like for example like a team like wanted to like play me on the entry role, like if I gave time into it, I feel like I could compete on the role.
yeah.
It's just more so that I feel like with especially being in IGL, the best role and the most comfortable role and like the most effective role is like that flex slash like support role. Like how and so that way I can allow my teammates to kind of flourish in those more entry roles, and then like I said, take a step back and do more of like droning and communicating and stuff like that.
Yeah. And so, you know, method comes and goes. Like, I think it kind of ended on Game Rogue Summer series or whatever it was called. Like the big
Yep.
one where OXG and some of the pro teams were in
Yep.
there. Like I kind of neat cut off. And if I recall, let me check my notes. But you actually kind of got you had the a loss to Outlast, which at the time, you know, very good team. And then you guys forfeited the rest of the tournament. Was that just like the team broke apart mid tournament? Because I tried to look into this, but unfortunately, search functions nowadays not great, and neither are
Yeah.
VODs.
If I remember correctly, we were still having roster problems at the time.
Okay,
Like I said, there it 100% was not like a good team environment. I was putting too much pressure on the guys like to succeed and like results and stuff like that. And looking back at it, if I just took it more like day by day and just like appreciated the small wins versus looking big picture, I think we would have had more short-term success. So I think due to like just uh environment problems and personality conflicts and stuff like that, the roster wasn't really the greatest. So I remember I think we were trying to play with Owen at the time.
I think so.
I can't remember who it was for, to be honest. I couldn't even tell you what the five we were playing with. I know JMN was there, I know Yub was there, Owen was there, but off the top of my head, it was just like wasn't working. The chemistry wasn't there. The vibes wasn't there. Everyone was like just not having like a good experience. So I think we basically just said we'll go our separate ways and ended it there.
All right. And then how does SSG Academy start? Like, how does this come about? Because, did you approach Call Out? Did Call Out approach you? Like, or were you just picked up from a different core of players that was already going to be SSGA? Like, how did that get started? Because that, as far as I know, this is the closest we've had to a true academy team in the
Right.
Siege ecosystem.
Yeah. So I would say I definitely reached out to call out for one. I knew that the opportunity was there because the old SSG Academy roster was getting basically like picked up to go into Pro League.
Yeah.
And the roster was basically getting rebuilt. So uh, I live with Hot and Cold and Rampy in an apartment. So obviously I talked to Houghton a lot. He's my cousin. So
Yeah.
he was on SSG at the time. So like I was getting all this information about the SSG Academy breakup and stuff like that. So I took that as an opportunity to reach out to call out and say, hey, if you want to give me an opportunity, I'd love to build a roster for SSGA. And he kind of, went with me.
All right. And, SSG Academy actually had a fair bit of success, honestly, like big picture wise. You lost to Carnico in the Atlanta Major Quals, which there's no shame there, especially given the time. You beat Wildcard. You got over the
We
demon.
we got him.
Yeah. And then you lose to E1 All Stars in the second Atlanta Major qualifiers, which, like, once again, not a bad team to lose to if we're talking like top of T2. They're gonna be in the contest, and
Right.
they're gonna be in the conversation. And then after that, you guys make XGS 6, you play TPL, you get out of groups, uh, and you guys are like competing here. What was going on with this roster? Because, like, what did you think of these runs?
So I think in the very beginning, I immediately knew that I wanted to play with JetCon. Like right when I got the okay, like to build SSGA, I knew that I wanted to play with Jet. And from the very beginning, like the runs were great. Like I think from like we were starting to actually play with like some of his collegiate friends from the very beginning. Like, we were playing
Yeah,
with like IMAT and like Zosha and like just like some of these like collegiate guys from the I can't. Why
I
can't
think
I
it's
remember the
the UMass
college that
team or
he goes to?
something.
Yeah, I can. I actually. That's actually bad on me that I can't remember the college. But anyways, like the runs were good, but I knew that the roster wasn't at the level that it needed to be competitive, and that was just always my biggest thing, and that was in the back of my head is that even if we weren't winning series, even if we weren't like beating Card and Co, for example, which at the time was the best T2 team,
Yeah,
100%. Uh, I wanted to be competitive against them, and I didn't think that we had the roster to do that. So I kept pushing and pushing to try to get there. Eventually, we picked up Vil. Um, we actually were going to play with Rai Rai. He was actually on the roster, but complications came into his personal life where he wanted to kind of step down and just take a break basically.
yeah,
So we had to look for different options, and that's when I think we picked up Aimkey. Um, and then yeah, like the team was good. I there's obviously every team has problems. Like
yeah,
and everyone knows that from talking to me or just looking at my past or just like even like just talking to other people like through the grapevine that my problems as a player are due to my mental health or due to like just the way that maybe I react to like losses or like things like that. Just basically like on the mental side of the game. So I think over the course of losing to E1 All Stars and losing to Card and Co and just like not getting where I thought we could be, especially with the roster that we had with Vil and Aimkey and stuff. I think it kind of got to me where I was like, I'm not going to be able to get back to where I think I should be, like this pro level or like where I want to be at least.
yeah, yeah,
So I know that that kind of started to cause some problems, and we ended up having a team meeting. I don't know, like dates or anything like this. It was probably like 2 weeks before I got the boot from the team.
yeah,
I know that the team, like JetCon specifically, really, really, really wanted to play with like Trev Mac Focal, and I had I have like my reasons on why I didn't think like the two would like be like the best roster. I thought that Trev Mac and Focal are like great players, and that they all like just have like I said, every player has their problems, and I don't want. It's not my
yeah.
business to go into
Pros
like
and
personal
cons.
problems, but exactly. So, um, after we had the meeting, I knew that like just something was up. Like everything was good from my end. I felt like the changes were like super good. Like I started to just communicate a lot more. Like I was very open with my teammates, like about what was going on in my mental health, about my uh about that I started therapy, about just stuff like that. And I felt like better.
Yeah.
But then a week later, basically I got a call saying that they wanted to just like drop me, and that I knew that they were gonna basically go with like the Trev Mac Focal roster because they felt that long term it had like more success.
Yeah. And that kind of brought you to the Pokegang squad for the E1 or E2, pardon, qualifiers. Was this like a pug stack or was this a like
That
actual
was
team?
no that actually was just a one like that. It just happened so randomly. Like I made a tweet saying that I needed a team, and then I remember I think Exceed or Deadly hit me up and was like, "Hey, we need a player." And those guys, it was a complete opposite environment of what I've played for. Like entire like
I mean,
I've
we've
come
heard the comms, man. Like they
I,
are.
I I've come from like super structured systems, like playing to like like to get to like the pro level. You gotta like make sure you're focused, like this. And then I go to like Pokegang, and it's all about vibes, all about just momentum, all about just making sure that you're never tilted, just always good, like just shit like that. And it was fun. It was honestly, looking back at it, one of my biggest regrets so far in my T2 career is leaving Pokegang to join Osiris. I think that
Yeah.
if I stayed with Pokegang after making E2, I think that it would have been really good just for my Siege career, but also for my mental health because
Yeah.
those guys were just like great people to be around. Like shout out to Siege, like great friend, bro. Like he's just a
Yeah.
great person.
He's a great guy. And I will say, like having heard things from being a part of the Osiris org while it was still a thing, like I get why you wanted to join the Osiris team. Like there was the rumors of what was
Yes.
going on with that roster heading into Element 2 was that it was going to be fucking disgusting. So
Yes.
obviously, why don't you tell it from your perspective of like, hey, why is this the right move from me from like a from your perspective?
I mean, you again, it was just like obviously the roster that was like talked about didn't end up happening, but there was
Yeah.
like a lot of rumors about ex pro players going to Osiris and like just stuff like that. And at the same time, even the players that were there were good.
Yeah.
They've played in competitive Siege before. Like I think Ab and I played Pro League before. Like
Yeah.
so these guys had experience. And that was just like the thing that Pokegang didn't have was experience. Like they had like the vibes, they had like just like even the mechanics were honestly there. But they just didn't have like the game knowledge or the experience. So I felt like for my career, it was going to make the most sense to go to Osiris and possibly like just try to win and be playing with these players that understand the competitive side and just like I don't know, looking like talking about it out loud, like it sounds like it makes sense, but it didn't work.
Yeah, and I was curious about Osiris because you look at it from the outside in. Obviously you're very you've like at this point in 2023, you're kind of viewed as like this IGL figure because you've been on Method, you've been on SSGA, kind of viewed as
Yeah,
this shot caller IGL type figure. You're joining Osiris, which has Abenai, who's for this team effectively viewed as the IGL shot caller. Was
yeah.
there like a issue of too many cooks in the kitchen or anything like that? Because I mean, beyond just you two, from the comms that we heard in Element 2 as well, it seems like people were all very vocal on that team.
Yeah, Osiris was definitely a very vocal roster. I don't necessarily even think that there was problems when it came to like the in-game calling. Osiris 100% like all the problems just had to do with out of game stuff or just like personality conflicts. Like uh I honestly like could not I don't want to bash on the guys, but like that was probably one of like the worst like teams or like worst systems like that I've ever like played in. Like it was very just like uncomfortable for me. Like there was like days I just didn't want to come to like practice or like days that I'd wake up like dreading to even like play the game. And it's like how am I supposed to like how you say like be a leader or be like an IGL when I'm feeling these kind of things. And then people always say, well, you got to talk about it. You got to like, open up. But then I don't know any of these guys, especially on Osiris. Like I didn't feel that connection. I didn't
Yeah.
feel like the the like, oh, I could really like open up to these guys like a family type setting, where like on Pokegang or on like even like looking back to like DZ, like those systems where you just build connection and you feel really close to your teammates. Like that's where you can kind of open up and kind of talk more about the personal shit that people are going through.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Cyrus, like that just never really happened. There was always just like pent up anger within myself and within other players, and it just led to blow ups and led to just confrontations and problems, and that's why we didn't win.
Yeah, was this like not to directly connect the two or anything, but were these like interpersonal issues part of why the Floof's like mid-season drop happened and kind of caused that last second stand-in of Lunar for that Con and Co elimination game?
Yeah, I think that we were all trying to just figure out like the problems as to like why we weren't winning. And again, every single person has their own issues. I think Floofs did have problems as a player, just like I have problems as a player. Do I think that it was deserving of him to get like the boot mid-season like that? I honestly, looking back at it, think we probably should have just worked it out and played through it, and seen what we could have done with against Carnico, because like our chances of winning going into a sub or with into the game with a sub are probably a lot lower than playing with like the player we've been practicing with. And like, I don't know, I just think there was just communication problems. We needed to sit down and really try to talk it through and be adults about it, and we just never really did that.
And just to be clear on this, were you the IGL of Osiris, or was it Abonai, or was it like supposed to be the X set like 5-man calling system? Like how was
Definitely,
Osiris structured?
Osiris was definitely more structured into like a 5-man system. When I came into the system, I let everyone know like from the get go that I was 100% comfortable just taking a back seat, because at this point I've also like, trust me, like I spend a ton of time just thinking about my failures and about how I can improve as a player and how I can get back to like, where I want to be. And the thought of like, oh, maybe me being this like vocal IGL person isn't really working right now. Maybe I could try to take a step back and just play the game more and let my teammates kind of take more of that leading style.
Yeah.
So when I went into Osiris, I had that thought because how you said Abu and I had that experience and had that knowledge in the game. So I thought he could kind of take that role. Just over time though, like with my experience and with my game knowledge and stuff, it's just kind of who I am as a person to kind of speak up and want to like call the win conditions or call how to like, maybe I see a play that a player can do or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like naturally who I am. So eventually, it just developed into like a 2-man system with me and Abunai, and I guess everyone else like Devin and Sneeze and Floof just like calling opportunities whenever they saw them.
Yeah, and I do want to kind of pivot this conversation off that topic of like the IGLing. Like, is that more you kind of mentioned it there that like you don't necessarily need to be the singular voice of a team, but it sounds like you
100%.
definitely want to be like a part of the calling structure. Like,
Yeah.
have you ever considered joining up with like a poison or a carnage type figure and be like that secondary shot caller that isn't necessarily the main guy, but definitely has that influential voice of like second in command, like give that alternative perspective? Because that's one thing I think a lot of players, at least in my experience across multiple titles, kind of underestimate is like, yeah, I've got all this knowledge and experience, but I don't have to be the general. I can be the lieutenant, sergeant, what like
Whatever their
the
ranking
next
is.
level lower, like.
No, I honestly couldn't agree with you more. And like when I was playing with even like VPS, I played with Poison. Like it's so weird looking back at that roster and like thinking about it, because I really enjoyed that roster. Like that was with Max and Twist and Poison, and it was just like that, like you said, the dual, like it felt like a weight off my shoulders, because Poison is genuinely a talented IGL. He knows
Yeah,
how to call the game. So I was able to just like take a step back and just play. That was a roster where I genuinely, when I got dropped off that, I didn't understand why. I felt like my mental, my everything was actually like trending very well. And you can actually even go back and find tweets of Poison vouching for me after getting dropped off BPS, and he was saying that we didn't drop Nix because of his mental or anything like that. It was just because of didn't work out,
yeah.
whatever. But
So I one thing I have heard as far as you and kind of like who you are as a person and as a player is kind of like being a bit of a perfectionist for good and for ill, because we could hear it in the E2 comms, like even when you guys win around dominantly, you're still like, guys, we got to be on those defaults, you got to be on those
Yeah,
defaults.
yeah,
And on one end of the argument, like, as someone who edits, so of course I gotta watch the shit over and over and over again. Like, I get it, you gotta have that attention to details, the perfectionism. But then on the other end, that drive to perfection can also be seen as negative sometimes. How does that like interact with your calling? Because I've heard like sometimes it's not just the big things that can kind of shock the mental, but also some of the smaller things where it's like, yeah, losing a 5v3 sucks, but shit happens at Siege. Sometimes they
right.
shoot back. Like, how does that perfectionism and like trying to keep that mental like factor into things for you?
I mean, thinking about it, I realistically think it's all just about balance. I do want to push these, like for example, like thinking about the team that I'm playing with now. I'm playing with Cal, I'm playing with DJ, I'm playing with Marmalade. We actually just picked Marmalade up, and I'm playing with Neo. So
Yeah,
like with Cal and DJ, like two players that maybe not as known, Neo and Emma, two players that are more known. But when I'm looking at like the small things and like looking at like being a perfectionist, like I do want to use my knowledge and use my game sense to make sure that I can help these players become their best versions of themselves, basically.
yeah,
Um, but then I want to look at the other side of the coin, I guess, and kind of look at it from their perspective. Like I think going into this roster, especially now, I'm just trying to be a lot more lenient and a lot more just how I said in the moment and take it day by
yeah,
day. Just because the trying to just like like the get everything to a detail like a perfect detail and like make sure it's how I want it to be like and like make sure everything's like basically the DZ system. Like I still
yeah.
feel like I run the DZ system, and I think even just looking back at like SI, I was talking about it with Houghton. I think it gets under his skin a little bit. I was like, I think DZ was the best team at SI, and he's like, I don't know, man. Like I think that we were pretty. He's like, we 2-0'd phase. Like I think we so.
Yeah,
I
especially
really
because he was playing for SSG, so like that's the
yeah yeah
antithesis,
yeah.
right?
So whenever I'm talking about the system and talking about Siege and stuff, I love the DZ system.
Yeah,
That's what I come from. That's what I love watching. It's what I love playing. And but again, it's all about balance. And I think I've just been pushing the system way too much, and it obviously hasn't been working with previous teams that I've been playing on. So I need to try a different approach, and that's why I've been like, I don't know. I've been very more vocal on Twitter about it, like publicly about my mental health and about just, I guess, the different approaches that I'm taking now.
yeah,
Whether people believe me or like stand by me, it's each their own. They answer whatever they want, but I just want to like express that I understand where people are coming from, and yeah,
yeah.
that over perfection mindset of like just trying to get everything perfect, it's not the way to win.
Yeah. And so one thing that people in the community have kind of pointed out is that there's been like multiple times where you've pointed out like, hey guys, I've improved from where I was. I recognize my flaws, like it's my mental, it's my IGLing, all this stuff. I've
Hmm.
improved since the last time, and like I'm more than what my rep makes me out to be. And of course, when it comes to mental health, it's not linear progress. It's not like
Yep.
something that's obvious to show like in the scoreboard or like just in how somebody acts. So I don't want to like oversimplify this
No, go
because
ahead.
but how does the how would you respond to the kind of argument of like, hey, Nix has said he's improved multiple times and like got fixed some of these issues, but they seem to keep happening across multiple teams. What would your response to that kind of point be?
Yeah, it's a fair point, 100%. Like I would say, if you just go back and look at my Twitter, like you could definitely find moments of me like saying that I've improved. One thing that I think is just a different perspective going into 2024 that I think has changed a lot is I am done making like excuses. I'm done kind of like I don't know. I take full responsibility about what happened in the past. I understand that I hurt people. I understand that I made mistakes, and I understand that I said things that I shouldn't have said. And the thing is I can't take any of those things back. So all I'm really trying to do now is let people like communicate that to the public. Let them know that I'm sorry. Let them know that I am trying to be a better person, and that there's nothing I can do to take those things back. I can only own up to my actions. That's it. And moving forward, I could only just try to be a better person. So I'm just trying to be better, like a better person every single day. Like I'm actively in therapy. I work out like a lot now, like in terms of just like staying physically active.
Yeah.
I think a big thing that I don't talk about, well, I guess I didn't talk about in the past, but I talk about more is just I'm very open about what's going on with about like the people around me now, whether it be hot and cold or whether it be my teammates, just stuff like that. Even if like I don't know you that well, people that like just come into my DMs, I would be more than happy to have a conversation about what's going on in my life or just about what's going on in the past or what I did in the past, just so that they can kind of gain some perspective.
Okay.
So I think all of those things just have really helped me mentally and helped me just grow as a person. And I'm just really hoping that it's gonna show in my gameplay and show in my show in the team because I really have like a lot of faith in the roster that we're building right now.
Yeah. Sounds like some
Yeah,
straight shooters if it's you, Neo, and Marm as a core. So like,
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
good
So
place to start.
for sure, and it's all about perspective and it's all about just taking it day by day. I just gotta take it day by day and just enjoy the process. That's really it.
Yeah. And to close things out, what is next for Nightmare Next?
It's just like I said, just staying. I want to have fun. I want to get back to just like how I was in the community. Like I feel like if I look back, just when I was 18, 19, 20, I think like when I was, I think my mental health problems really started when I got dropped off Mirage. That's when I really went into a deep depression and it was bad. So now I want to get out of that. I want to have some more fun, and I want to bring back to the energetic, get in your face hype Knicks that I used to be, and show people that people can change. That it's not you're not defined by your mistakes. So